Thank you, Jesse. Last summer, my wife and I listened to A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers as we drove across country for our daughter's wedding. The book made us laugh out loud. It made us cry. It was an amazing book. It was the first one of hers that we read. Now I think I've read all of them but one. I've been working my way through. But it's the story of the spaceship called the Wayfarer. And the Wayfarer cuts holes through the fabric of space, creating shortcuts to improve commerce throughout the galactic community. Now, it's not a fancy exploring ship. It's more of a roadwork crew. And they spend their whole lives living on this scrapped-together ship, doing run-of-the-mill work for okay pay. And this story is told from the perspective of Rosemary. Rosemary is a human in a landscape where humans only exist as a remnant of the small group who left the Earth when it became unable to live on it. Here's a picture of the crew, I believe. It included a couple of humans around the crew. One is Captain Ashby, two techs called Kizzy and Jenks, Sissix, who's the Andrisk pilot. There's a Grum named Dr. Chef, and a Cyanot pair called Ohan. And finally, an AI named Lovey. Now, they all stick together and they lean into their differences and they find a way to support each other even when they feel uncomfortable. And Chambers' descriptions of how they respond to certain situations was eye-opening and really enjoyable. I'm currently reading Galaxy and the Ground Within. Well, I'm saying currently because I wrote this, but I just finished it last night. It was awesome. I cried, I think, for the last 3 chapters, but in a really good way. Because she has this knack for imagining these huge worlds where all these different species live together and they have vastly different physiologies, different languages, different experiences, but they all manage to get along and support one another and make life sustainable for everybody. I find her addressing very specific things that I sometimes get stuck with, but when you're talking about it with aliens, it kind of opens up my heart and my mind, because if you've never met an alien, you don't have any built-in prejudices or suppositions about what they're going to be like. One of the storylines involves Rosemary and Sissix. Now, Rosemary notices, this is Rosemary and Sissix. Rosemary notices that Sissix is always more cuddly and physically affectionate than the humans are, and she finds it just a little bit odd. But they grow to be deep friends through their adventures, and one time they go back to visit Sissix's home planet. And Rosemary is surprised by how much resistance she feels in her own body when she sees how these Andrisks behave together, because as soon as they arrive, her entire family fall into this giant wriggling pile of family members with cuddles and snuggles and all this going on, and some even breaking apart to couple on their own. And this is all wonderful and great for this species, but Rosemary is like going, how much reaction do I have in my body when they're just being them? And she starts to think about how sterile and antiseptic it must feel on the ship for Sissix to be with a species that are not as affectionate as Andrisks are. So she wonders how she can adjust her own comfort levels to be able to support her friend. And they have some really deep conversations about the disparities and the expectations and the needs that each of them might have. And Rosemary realizes that Sissix has been doing all the adjusting so far. And so she makes a decision that she's going to try to do her part to make her friend feel as welcome as she has felt. Rosemary doesn't stop being human. She just adjusts her behavior in that moment to be more welcoming to another being. That's what I love about sci-fi. It lets us step out of the mores that we don't even realize we've been indoctrinated into and offers us a new way of seeing. There's a story of 2 young fish swimming along, and an older fish comes back in the other direction. And the older fish passes and says, "How's the water, boys?" And the 2 young fish keep swimming, and finally one says to the other, "What the heck is water?" Many of us spend most of our lives not even seeing the water we're swimming within. And it often takes output from something outside of ourselves for us to readjust. I know I did anti-racism work for a long period of time coming out of seminary, but it wasn't until Michael Brown was killed that something in me shifted, and I started doing it with a different perspective and seeing things that I had never seen my entire life growing up, always considering myself anti-racist. And we're in a new moment in history now, and there are tremendous changes going on around us, in our country, in our world, on the earth itself. Even definitions of church seems to be changing as the pandemic's after effects begin to surface, and we see the regular reminders of climate change all around us. We know the only thing permanent in life is change, and we are in the midst of it right now. But we have to maybe take a moment and say, while it's changing, maybe we can see something in this change that we wouldn't have been able to see if life just kept going on as it always had. I'll give you an example. I grew up working class Catholic in a Catholic community, and I never even suspected that I might be queer till I was almost 40. It wasn't within the range of options, so I never saw it. I mean, I honestly thought that they used beautiful women in advertising because everyone was attracted to beautiful women. And that crush I had on my jazzercise instruction, that was just normal. But even when I opened up to go to seminary and become a UU minister, I still didn't see what I didn't see. Because the young seminarian intern at my home church invited me to go out to dinner with a bunch of her friends when she learned that I'd been accepted to Meadville Lombard Theological School. And it was exciting, and I was nervous, especially I realized everybody else at the dinner party was gay. Now, they were fun and smart and warm and welcoming, but I was acutely aware that I was the only one not like them. I was in a room full of queer people, and I finally knew what it felt like to be a minority. When I mentioned this to the intern, she kind of stared at me like I was from another planet. It was just a room full of people. I'm still embarrassed by this memory and how I realized in that moment that it was me othering people, that I was bringing something to that didn't exist for any of the rest of them. It's hard to see the water in our bowl. Life is a journey, a transition from one reality to another, and to another. And it happens whether we're consciously aware of it or not. So it's so much better if we take that moment to become conscious of the ways the water around us is flowing and changing. As Unitarian Universalists, we have been trying to transition into being more welcoming and more open reality, one that makes space for perspectives and understandings and lived realities that are different than the status quo. I've been preaching welcoming sermons to many churches, and I'm sure you've heard a fair share of your own already. But you know what? This vision is being preached to UU churches for the past 30, 40, maybe 50 years, and Sunday mornings are still the most segregated hour of the week. Not because we're bad people, not because we have not tried, not because we do not value diversity in the abstract. We do, it's great. But I think it's maybe because we start at the wrong end. We start with thinking that we have to get other people into our pews. Too many times we push for diversity, but have no idea what that diversity might actually ask of us. We want people with different shades of melanin, different pronouns, different family recipes, but we really want them to fit into what already is. Because humans long for that sense of belonging, of being seen and welcomed. And sometimes we want a space where we don't have to give up any of who we think we are just to be there. But we are willing to give up a little bit. The question is, how much should you have to give up? At my first UU church, there was a huge culture of classical music, and I was always more of a folk and bluegrass girl. But I would nod as people went on enthusiastically about a piece of music that I was like, sounds like the background to a Bugs Bunny cartoon. Sorry, I hope I'm not offending anybody. That's where I'm coming from. But I did my best to pass. and to fit in with this group of seekers that my heart wanted to be with, because they so aligned with my spiritual journey. And that's normal, isn't it? We all give up a little bit of ourselves to be part of community, but there's a limit on how much anyone is willing to give up to fit in. Often you want to be the cool people with a readily apparent diversity. But we also want our churches to remain comfortable, the way it always has been. Please join us, but don't expect we're going to change. I've wrestled with this with a couple churches. The way people of color or young people are often surrounded by well-intentioned church members who, trying to make them feel welcome, surround them so they'll stay. But often that welcome is only skin deep. So the folks who can fit in are willing to give up a little bit of their self-identity to claim this kinship, they stay. But other people come to a few services and figure out there really isn't room. There's not room for the whole of who they are, and so they move on. I thought I had to become a minister in order to get folk music played in my services. It's good. What's going on with all this? Why is it so difficult to create the wide community we say we want? Well, academic and poet Bayo Akomolafe describes a new way of seeing that he calls post-activism, decolonialization, and transracial. Huge words. He's an academic, did I say that? But he's also known for saying, the times are urgent, let us slow down. The times are urgent, let us slow down. Who doesn't want to slow down? When I heard those words, I was hooked right away. Coming out of Nigeria, Komolafe sees differences with a twist. He sees us divided not amongst people, but as fields, whereas whiteness is a field and a perceived perspective and a way of being in the world that flattens, that takes away the rich contours of life to allow everybody to feel safe and in control. It's about believing if we have enough control, we can feel comfortable all the time. And it holds within it a judgment of difference, of anything that might disrupt that promise of sanctuary. Becky Chambers had written, if you believe you have control, then you believe you're at the top. And if you're at the top, then people who aren't like you, well, they must be somewhere lower, right? That fits my experience of whiteness. But Akomolafe says blackness is a field resisting that flattening. Blackness pushes for the fullness of life, for all the emotions, not just the easy and comfortable ones. It's an acknowledgement that life is hard, no matter what the advertisers might promise us. And he does acknowledge that we all live in bodies that are recognized at black or brown or white, and that recognition changes our experience for sure. But he says that we can make a conscious choice to be part of either field. We can be part of the illusion of control, or we can be part of that resistance and that opening for all the flowering that's available. Everyone born in this country is born into whiteness as the default, even if it means code shifting, acting white to fit in. And whiteness is that lie that says if we are just good enough, if we just follow all the rules, if we know the right people, if we have the right products and drive the right cars, that we can control our lives and we can feel safe. And Akomolafe says the people with black skin can also inhabit the white field, that his home country of Nigeria very much leans into a flattening of life, even though it has the highest per capita population of dark-skinned people. It's what's driving white folks to try to ban books and restrict certain histories from being taught. They believe that lie, that we never have to feel bad. We never have to acknowledge that things aren't always sunshine and roses. Akomolafe's work opened up a huge space of possibility for me, because if whiteness and blackness can be inhabited by anyone, if they are a perspective and a worldview rather than an undefined and unchangeable part of who I am, I have the freedom to choose how I'm going to act in this world. And I can identify places where I act from whiteness, and I can reevaluate, does this serve me? Just shutting down my emotions or tightly following the rules or avoiding discomfort give me the life that I really want. Because it takes a lot of energy to press down emotions. Just like those farmers out there trying to maintain their monoculture, it takes a lot of poison to kill off everything else. So it's no wonder our country is so filled with angry and depressed people trying to push down so much of their being that they would love to let out into the world. What if we stopped? What if we accepted the whole of every human without trying to make them be like us? I'll give you one example. A person I know belongs to a women's chorus, and they've been trying to become much more diverse over the past few years. They formed committees, they held talking circles, they read a ton of books and watched movies. They even changed their bylaws so they'd be more welcoming, and they made some progress. A few women of color did join, and they've expanded their range, making sure they sing a percentage of songs every concert that are written by women of color. It's made a difference. But at a rehearsal, the conductor invited the group to go off book and to follow her as she led them as they were leading a new song, because it was written by a black woman, and she wanted to break it out of the tightly sung rhythm that everyone was singing it in. But you know what? She got tremendous pushback from the white women in the group. So much so that she finally threw in the towel and said, fine, we'll do it as written. It was only afterwards that she realized that the black woman in the chorus had been supporting her and saying, yes, let's try it the way you want to go. Whiteness at work in that chorus expected things to follow the rules and refused to let any wiggle room in from the written notation. But blackness resisted. It wanted to bring in the freedom and joy, even at the expense of maybe creating something that sounded a little different. What if all of us stopped worrying about how many people of different skin tones or genders or even ages came into our buildings and started making space for the whole range of emotions in ourselves? What if we started living so fully and joyfully, embracing all of the sorrow and all of the pain that each of us has, everything that's part of the messy experience of being human? Don't you think people out there would say, hey, I want that too? I want that space where I can be all of me. I want that space where whoever I am is okay all the way across. And everybody here who's already here could go, I could tell that joke I was afraid to tell before, or I could make that food that I wasn't sure people would like, or whatever it is that you've been holding back because you wanted to fit into this community. Remember, I was so proud when I bought my first Prius because I thought, oh gosh, now I can be a real you. It doesn't start out there. It starts in here. It starts by being part of the resistance. It starts by noticing the times you shut down your own needs in order to fit in. We are all a bunch of aliens sliding on this big blue planet through space, each of us bringing totally unique experiences and perspectives and ideas. Embracing the alien qualities in ourselves is the first step to seeing the wholeness of all those around us. I'm going to close with the words of a famous alien with pointy ears. Live long and prosper. I'm going to now introduce